Hey all, it's Anthony. In this video, I'm going to use my prototype to show how pattern-based XML literals could enable you to write modern dynamic web apps in less time and with less code complexity by significantly reducing the amount of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript required to produce dynamic content. I have here the same ASP.NET Core MVC project I used in my top-level code video. I've merged that prototype with this one for this demo. The big difference is that now this XML literal isn't producing an X document, but rather all of its elements are creating strongly typed objects defined in this web views namespace. These objects know how to render themselves and can contain other objects that also know how to render themselves. Let me show you what I mean. If I wanted to add an expander to a web page, also known as an accordion, I'd look up some docs online and most of them would probably look like this one. They tell me you need to lay out these HTML elements, decorate them with these CSS classes, add these styles to your headers, add this JavaScript. Here are some tips to how you can make the experience better. I can absolutely do this, but as a desktop app developer, I don't particularly want to. I'm accustomed to a more encapsulated approach to building rich UI. Coming from a WinForms, WPF, or even WebForms background, I want to be able to simply write this. Or, if I want to do something custom with the header, this, and call it done. Let's run that. As you can see, the expanders are both there, and they work. The second one has a bolded header, and if we look at the page source, you'll see that all of those implementation details of the expander, the CSS, JavaScript, the specific HTML elements, and CSS classes required are all there, only I didn't have to write any of it because it's all encapsulated in this expander class, which knows how to render itself. Let's look at another example, how to make a drop-down navigational menu. This first example triggers from a click and uses JavaScript. The second example is pure CSS and works on hover, but only supports one level of items. This third example supports multiple levels of nested menus, but requires I model my menu as a series of nested lists, which is quite rational, but can be supremely tedious when editing. And none of these examples show how to make the menu stay on top of the browser window, so I need to find another example and try to integrate pieces from all of them to get what I want. Again, coming from a WPF background, I want this. It's logical, concise, and shows clearly the structure of my navigation without any of the implementation details. As you can see, the menu is rendered as expected. It opens down on click at the top level, to the side on hover on the second level. It supports multiple levels. Items with links include those links. Items with sub-items have triangular indicators, and the menu floats, so it's always on top as I scroll the page. And if I don't like that, I can just write always on top false, and that works too because the menu class knows how to render that behavior. But before we look at that, let's take a look at one last example. This is a carousel. It's pretty cool. In fact, there's an example of this in the ASP.NET Core sample. But one problem I have with this example is that all the content is static, and I'm more likely to want to power this carousel with some data from a database. Now, I could use link and an embedded expression to dynamically generate all of those items in my document, but that's not enough. The task is a little bit more complex than that because there are these two parts here. The actual items, which are going to be displayed, and the indicators that you have to keep in sync. What I want is data binding. I want to be able to write something like this. Item source equals database get carousel data. And let's take a look at that data. So now, just as in WPF, I can go in here and I can say carousel item template, and then this code right here. And now, just as in WPF, the carousel will use this template to render each item, and individual properties are bound to points from my data model. So when I run this, the carousel is behaving as expected with all of the images, text, and links per my item template. And it's all data bound, so if I were to go into my database and change the data or add a few more items, I could do so without having to modify my UI. And as a bonus, you'll note that the menu now scrolls with the content. Now, if we look at the source for this page, and you can see that the carousel has actually added the required style sheets and scripts to the header, the total length of this page is 342 lines of code. But more importantly, a massive reduction in complexity, all made possible simply by making VB's XML literals pattern-based. If you'd like to know more, check out the companion blog post. I'd love to get your feedback in the comments or on Twitter. Please share with your friends, and thanks for watching.